And we're live. Amazing. Okay, great. Well, welcome to another episode of Office Hours with Dr. Swathi. Today we are joined by Dr. Libby Shelton. And just as all of our other sessions, we are sponsored by the MSL Academy. So if you are an aspiring MSL or a current MSL and looking for some guidance and support, do not hesitate to go to www.themslacademy.com to learn more. All right. Well, getting right into it. So, as I mentioned, we have an amazing guest here today. And so, I think one of the ways we can get started, actually, maybe a little housekeeping before we get started. I'm like getting too excited. So, just housekeeping before we get started, I do see some people trickling in. So, as we are chatting, I mean, we have some prepared, content and discussion. Both of us love talking about networking. So, we're going to focus a lot of today's conversation on networking. But of course, we're here to answer your questions as well. So if you have any questions, whether you're a current MSL, current medical affairs professional, aspiring MSL, aspiring industry professional in general, both of us can hopefully shed some light from our current experience and mentorship experience as well, working with tons of people just like you to help you make your best next career move. So to do that, please put, all your thoughts in the chat. If you have any questions that you want to ask us in the chat, I always say likely if you have a question, probably someone else here has the same question. So don't feel like, oh, maybe this question won't pertain. Likely it will pertain to someone else, whether they're here live or watching the recording. So as we're going through, opening spiels and going through some of the topics we want to talk about, do not hesitate to put the information on the questions and everything in the chat so that we can answer you and make this as interactive as possible. Okay, amazing. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Swathi Varanasi Diaz. I am an MSL. I've been in medical affairs for a while now and have had a number of different roles from, kind of entry level all the way to MSL and, doing all things field team, all things medical communications. So happy to answer any questions that, you have about that, about my journey. My journey is a little, unconventional, but happy to answer questions people are interested. And, would love to hand it over to our guest. So Dr. Shelton, if you could share a little bit about your background and a little bit about what you do now.
Hi, everyone. So like she mentioned, I'm Dr. Libby Shelton. I am currently a manager in oncology training and development. So that was something I had no idea it existed until I ended up in this role. So with that, I actually have had experience training our field sales teams, field medical teams, in addition to our field market access teams. So wide range of experience on that front. And so that was my first step into industry around 2.5 years ago now. So I started after graduating pharmacy school. I did a PharmD fellowship and got to learn a lot through that role. As a fellow, got a lot of exposure to the different opportunities within industry. And so outside of that, I also do some coaching for pharmacy students and early career professionals, obviously focused on industry since that is my area of expertise, but also just general professional development since that's something that I do within my training and development role. So happy to be here this evening.
Amazing. And thanks so much for sharing a little bit about your background and what you do now. I would actually, before we get into some of the other things I want to talk about, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what exactly it entails to be in this sort of training role. Because, as you mentioned, a lot of people might not know that this role exists. I only learned about the role after joining the industry myself, especially when we're getting started. We maybe know the functional areas of like clinical development, medical affairs, commercial, that's those sorts of kind of buckets or categories or functional areas. Or departments, I guess is the other kind of like normal term for it. But what about like this, like where does this particular role sit within the functional areas? And could you describe like some of the tasks and things you're responsible for?
Absolutely. So I know it's a little bit different depending on which company you're at and how training and development is set up. Sometimes it sits in the specific function that they're training for. So it can sit under medical affairs, it can sit under market access, or even in a sales or commercial type role. In my department, we actually just have like a whole training department. So we all sit together and it's under business operations. So kind of like a more niche area that you may not have heard of when you're thinking about functional areas because it doesn't exactly fit in one. So I work under business operations, and within that role, I like to think of training and development as a professor, but on now like the industry corporate side of things. So what I'm doing is I'm putting together curriculum plans to educate our field teams on either a new indication, new product that we have that could be launching soon that they need to go out and talk to their customers about. A lot of that also includes not only just like the clinical side of the training, but also some professional development skills. So some of the things that we've hosted are things like storytelling, influencing without authority, and those sort of more general professional development topics just help them be even more effective while they're out in the field. So yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I'm so glad that you're joining us today to talk about that because it's another opportunity that really lends itself amazingly. I feel like I'm saying amazing a lot tonight, but it lends itself really well to probably a lot of the people listening who are thinking about entering the pharmaceutical industry who don't have experience yet. So can you talk a little bit about, I know we're going off script here, but can you talk a little bit about, as like someone who's conventionally trained as a pharmacist like myself, what sort of skills you found were transferable or helpful to being successful at this role? Being, a pharmacist, this could even apply to like just being a clinician or even like a PhD researcher.
Yeah, I think being able to dive into clinical data and understand it, dissect it, and then also tailor that communication back to lots of different folks with various backgrounds. I think that's something, if you've been around long enough hearing these conversations or you're in industry, we talk a lot about like the cross-functional collaboration. So your partners throughout the different roles within pharma or the industry have lots of different backgrounds. Some people have business backgrounds, some people have healthcare backgrounds, some people are like finance and market research analytics type folks. So very different backgrounds, and so they see things with a different perspective. And I think as a pharmacist, one of the like skills we bring to the table, right, is our ability just to communicate and flex based on who our audience is. So as pharmacists, we're pretty good at that. And so I think that's like one of the things that I was able to bring to this role, just the clinical data and then being able to tailor communications to different folks with different backgrounds. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I would say also presentations, like while depending on your role now, you may not be like formally presenting all the time, but it still goes back to just like those communication skills and being able to talk to folks. So I would say those are probably like the biggest things in my role for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that for someone who might be listening, let's say like they maybe feel like in their current role, they don't have a lot of opportunities for communication skills and like sharpening those communication skills to make yourself like really stand out, particularly in the application process and demonstrating like this is something that you're good at. There are so many ways that you can kind of incorporate ways to improve your communication skills. I think a lot of it just comes down to practice. And it's like, taking the initiative to be like, hey, I would love to present this to the internal team. I'd love to present this to a colleague. So it definitely does not need to be like, oh, you need to speak on stages or something to get speaking experience and communication skills, improvement. It can literally be just to one other person because it really does take a certain level of experience to be like, okay, you understand the concept to a point where you're able to actually share that message with someone else. So do you have any other tips for someone who's like just trying to improve their communication skills? Because as much as it applies to your specific role and what you do, I think it also very much applies not only to the MSL role, but like kind of really most industry roles, I would argue.
Yeah, I think I've actually been like in a course for working on communication because it's something like you can always get better at things. So one of the things that I've been trying to do is as I have thoughts, and even if it's like a written communication, I try to like verbalize it out loud, or like even just record myself doing like a small part of it to get like more comfortable verbalizing it, and then like watching it back and seeing how many filler words did I use, because I use a lot. Um, Seeing like, was it actually really clear how I explained this? Did it not sound the way I intended for it to sound, because I wrote it out and then I was speaking it? And so just working on like fine tuning some of those things, I think is a really good way to start. And then yeah, one of the other things that I've learned in that course too is trying to have like a nice flow to what you're speaking. So like have 3 points and then like just hit those points, and like don't be too scripted, but just work on like getting those things across and having like a clear flow in how you communicate. So some of the things that you can bring into even just conversations with folks, not necessarily like a presentation.
Yes, definitely. Amazing. Okay, great. So that was a bit longer of an intro than I anticipated. I just like I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your role, because I think like demystifying that a little bit so that people actually understand what exactly that role is, because maybe that's something that people realize that they could be great at, particularly if you have experience in academia or teaching. I mean, this role would be incredible to do it on, one could argue like a larger scale, because you're training people who will then go out and speak to providers, or speak to external stakeholders in a way that can really make an impact on a grander scale. So that's awesome. Okay, cool. So one of the main things that we wanted to talk about today is networking. And even before I hop into the first question, I just want to give a little reminder, that if you want to ask any question about, Libby's role, about medical affairs, about, getting into industry, we're happy to completely, change the gear of the conversation to, fit exactly what you want to talk about, because this time is for you and we want to make it as interactive as possible. So if there is any question that you want to ask about, applying to become an MSL, what skills you think would be incredible to, bolster on your resume to get into industry, and anything that you can think of, we are here to answer. So I will just leave the chat open there, and just, if I'll continue to monitor it as the conversation goes, just to make sure we're not missing anything. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we really wanted to talk about was networking, and we both love networking. We both love to talk about networking. So, as you were thinking about, transitioning into the pharmaceutical industry, I know like PharmD fellowships are super competitive. I also did a PharmD fellowship a few more years before you, but as you were thinking of that, how did you utilize networking to learn more about the pharmaceutical industry in the first place?
Yeah. So I went to school at Purdue in Indiana. There's not a whole lot of pharmaceutical companies around. So the only one that I had exposure to was Eli Lilly. And some of their PharmD fellows had actually came and given a talk at Purdue. And they talked about like, if you want to get into this industry, pharmacy is a small world, network, network, network. And they recommended LinkedIn. And so I immediately, like literally that night, hopped on LinkedIn, like created my profile because I didn't have one. I was just a little student. Um, and kind of put that together and just started reaching out to different PharmDs. Actually, all the PharmDs I reached out to worked at Eli Lilly because I didn't know any other pharmaceutical companies. So it was like, no Lilly exists. So that was my search criteria, to finding PharmDs that I could at least talk to that had probably a similar path to mine. Um, and so that was really my first step into exploring industry. And so I was very upfront with everyone that, hey, I have no idea what industry is. I'm just trying to figure out what is this term that everyone keeps throwing around, the different functional areas, like what is that? Um, and so I tried to keep that up front so that they wouldn't expect more from me than I was able to offer, like more targeted or detailed questions as I was just sort of exploring what industry even was. And so I think that that gave me a good start. I got some more from having those conversations. I got more, search terms to look up and things that I could kind of do my own research on. So it was a good foundation, I would say, to start, to be able to dive a little bit deeper into what is industry and what it had to offer for a PharmD like myself.
Yeah, so let's get even more granular. So I know that you mentioned LinkedIn. So that's actually my primary mode of connecting with people as well, whether it was in the beginning when I was learning about, the pharmaceutical industry or now. I think it's incredible. I joke all the time because I like can't believe it's still free to just like search any person that you want and just like find them. And it could be like I feel like I follow and I connect with a lot of people just because I'm really interested in following along, because initially, even if they are that active on LinkedIn or they're not like accepting every single request, especially if you don't know them, you still automatically follow them, which is amazing. So it's like, even if you're not directly connected with them, you're interested, like you've told LinkedIn that you're interested enough in them that, LinkedIn is like, okay, we'll automatically follow them. So you get to like stay up to date with what they're doing, even if they don't accept your connection, which in the beginning is great, because, maybe in the beginning you're still learning and you don't necessarily want to chat with them immediately, but you at least still get to follow them. And so when you're following them, they like pop up on your news feed, or I don't know if that's what it's actually called on LinkedIn, but your feed. And so then you can actually stay up to date with what they're doing and then start engaging with their content. So there are so many ways that you can like start reaching out to people. And I think in the beginning, I was just like, I kind of used it for industry, but I also was like, I want to learn about this particular niche, which is integrative medicine that I particularly work in now. And I wanted to find any and everyone who was like involved with that search term. And, LinkedIn has a search bar. And so you can kind of look for some of those niche terms, especially if you're interested in a particular therapeutic area, even within pharma, so that you can find people who kind of, that you can learn more from. And one of the things I always say, and I would love to get your feedback on this, Libby, is, for every maybe 10 to even like 20 people that you request to connect with, people are really busy. And so maybe they don't use LinkedIn that much. Maybe they're not accepting people they don't know. And maybe they accept your, connection request, but then they don't respond to the message that you send them. I would say like 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 maybe is like a pretty like good ratio to get a response, especially if you're messaging people who you don't know, or perhaps you even don't have a lot of mutual connections with. And I always say, like, don't take it personally, because people have things going on. And as much as you might really, really want to chat with them right now, they might not have the time of day for you right now, which is fine. And so I always say cast a wide net, because that may be the ratio that you get. You might get a higher ratio, which is great. It just, don't take it personally when people don't respond, and understand that people, do have a lot of things going on. I don't know. What's your response to that?
First, I will say love LinkedIn, and I think it's the most accessible way to reach all the folks you're trying to reach, right? Like, most people are on LinkedIn. I can't say everyone, right? But like, you just have access to so many people for free. So take advantage of it 100%. The other thing that I will say is I created like a little framework to help, because I realized that I was having the same issue. I would reach out to people and they wouldn't respond to me. And then I would kind of take it personally. But then now that I'm in kind of that position, I realize that like people are busy, and like I get lots of people reaching out to me, and I don't have time to reach out to like message individually every single person. So some of the things that I've learned that have kind of helped are, one, just like introducing yourself, like, who are you? Why are you reaching out? Like, is it something on my profile that you saw? Is there something specific that you want to know about me? That usually helps when you're like a little bit more specific. I think also, if you do want to have a chat with someone, to let them know that like you're not looking for a whole hour of their time, but just like 15 minutes. Because I think if you put like, you quantify it as like 15 minutes, then it's a little bit more reasonable for someone to be like, oh, I have time for 15 minutes. I can do that. But also just be respectful of that 15 minutes when they do give it to you, because I've had some people be like, oh, 15 minutes is fine. And then they keep going on and on and on. And I'm excited. I'm happy to schedule another one, but it was 15 minutes. And then the last thing that I will say is just ending your like first message with a question. If you just say like happy to connect, like that's great. Now we're connected. I don't feel the need to say anything else because you didn't necessarily ask me a question. So ending it with a question, people feel, I don't want to say obligated, but your brain thinks that you have to respond to it because there's a question mark at the end of it. So just a couple little tricks. And then sometimes I'll wait, like if it's been, like 3 months or something, and it's someone I really do want to talk to, I will just follow up. Sometimes people get busy, they look at it and they get distracted. Me, I do that all the time. I'll look at something, a message, and then, my fiance or my dog is doing something crazy, and then I have to go address that. And so I forget that it's no longer marked as unread. So I lost it. So sometimes just following up to in an appropriate amount of time. I wouldn't say like the next day, like I would say at least give it like 2 weeks. People may be busy, traveling, all the things. So just following up is super helpful too.
Yeah, I love that you talked about following up, because I do think following up is really important, because just as you mentioned, people could, have every intention to respond, but then something comes up and then they're not able to. So yes, I think that's great. And so, apart from thinking about LinkedIn, what other platforms or like in-person events or things did you find helpful as you were starting to learn about the pharmaceutical industry, or even now as you're like integrating networking into your, into the like a part of what you do?
Yeah, I think trying to find conferences that are tailored to what you want to do. So for me, like there's a life science trainers and educators like network, and some people aren't necessarily like in the space yet. They want to be in the space, and so going to those things I think is really nice, because then you meet people that have like a shared interest as you. A lot of them are like experts in the field, right? So you get to see a lot and exposure to a lot being there. I also, like this past weekend, was at Young Black Pharma, or YBP. So it's for Black professionals looking to either get into pharma or that are in pharma. So lots of different backgrounds. You have just about everyone in the room. Like some people are even like HR, so not even like specific to a pharmaceutical function like that. So I think getting in rooms like that is definitely very beneficial, because there's a lot of knowledge that you can tap into, but I would be wary about making it so transactional, really focusing on like trying to get to know the person first before you hit them with an ask. Just really trying to be curious about who they are, what they're about, and even like their goals, and if there's anything you can do to also support them, whatever their goals may be.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the kind of transactional nature of networking sometimes. And I say that because a lot of the pushback that I've gotten from like students or early career people is like, like, of course, like I want to go into the conversation with like, like what I'm thinking about and what I want for me. Like that's what some of them will say. And they're like, but I don't want them to think I'm just here like asking like a one-sided sort of conversation where like it's almost like an interview, and like the person who is doing the outreach is just looking for one thing. So I think the question I have for you is like, how do we make the conversations more kind of two-sided versus making them transactional? Like how do we go about doing that effectively?
Yeah, I would say humanizing the conversation a little bit. So when I say that, I mean, instead of asking like, okay, what does a medical affairs professional do? Ask them more about like their job, their role. What do you do in your day to day? I think that makes it a little bit more personable than just asking general questions where like anyone could answer this. And asking more about like their specific role. I think the other part is just general good conversation skills, right? So active listening, so listening to what they're actually saying and responding to that, asking deeper questions about what they're saying rather than just going off the list of questions that you prepared. I specifically remember one interaction I had. It was a student. She was a pre-pharmacy student, so very, very early on in her career. And she came with a whole list of questions, and it was just like rapid fire. And I felt like I was in an interrogation for like half an hour. And she was very sweet about it. um, but I was like, whoa, this is a lot. I don't even know if you like want to get to know me at all. Like, it did feel very transactional. So I think just being human and asking those active listening and following up with like what they say, and then also not making it all about work in their job, because again, we're all humans who have other things that we do outside of work. So when you show interest in like those other passions that may not be someone's day job that they do all the time, shows that you're just a little bit more interested in them as a person than just the work they do and maybe what they can provide you from a professional standpoint, for sure.
Yes, definitely. And that's kind of like the EQ meets IQ conversation, where
Mhm.
it's like not only just about, and we talk about this inside the MSL Academy of like when you're doing KOL interactions, for example, it's like you're taking notes with these external stakeholders and speaking with these big time healthcare providers. Not only you're taking on like the clinical insights that you'll bring back to the team from a professional standpoint, you might also be taking notes on like, oh, this person, also their daughter just had, a lacrosse game and like how it went, and like those little extra bits of like personal information that do go a long way for you to remember for the next time that you actually have a conversation with them, so that you're talking about all the work stuff, but you're also creating more of that personal connection. So yeah, that's great. The other thing I wanted to add to everything that you just mentioned, which I agree with all the things, is that when you are thinking about creating more of like a long-standing relationship with someone, so it's not just like a one-off, like, hey, here are my questions, like let me learn a little bit more about you personally, like all that. When you actually want to take it to the next level and think about like how you can continue the conversation and how maybe you want to follow up in like a few months, or maybe like follow up a few times a year, something like that. One of the things that I think about, especially like I'm like a rabid note taker. So like as I'm talking to people, I'm always taking a bunch of notes. One of the things I'm thinking about is like at the bottom of my notes is like how I could potentially help this person. Again, this is not something I did on the first time. This has been like years and years and years of networking and me learning much, much, much later of like how to keep these, like new relationships alive. And it's like, yes, like maybe you reached out to them and you maybe got something out of that conversation, and like you like the other person, maybe they like you too, which is great. But it's like, how do you actually keep up that conversation? And the way that I've learned that's been really helpful is like, okay, this person might have mentioned that, they are looking to expand their network into a particular disease state, or they're looking to meet people in this particular, like type of company or something. Then I keep that in mind. And whether it's in a spreadsheet or just in your notes app or something, whenever that comes across your desk, so to speak, then that's something that maybe you can like connect those two people or think about how you can help that previous person, as you are continuing to bolster your network, but also help your existing network with people like that. I don't know if that's something that you also do, or if you have something to say about that, Libby.
Yeah, I was gonna add that. It was maybe a couple months ago. I was doing a workshop on networking, and one of the things that I was reading, I can't remember who said it, whose book it came from, but it was like the best networkers are actually super connectors. So they're the ones that are connecting other people to more people. So if that's like a skill that you like start to build, like you'll also just naturally expand your network because people see you as a resource. So then people will be like, well, who do you know that I can connect with? And they'll connect with you. And so creates a whole nice little web of all the connections. I would also say being able to follow up and also provide value in some way is super important. And I would agree that, as an early career professional, you don't always think you have a lot of value to add or to bring to someone that may be more seasoned than you. But there's always something that you can do, whether it's connecting them with someone else that maybe you networked with before and had that informational interview with. It could also be they share about some sort of project that they're working on something that they're trying to learn, and you share, maybe it's a simple article that came across your LinkedIn feed and it made you think of that person because that was something that they had mentioned. And so just showing value even in like small ways, or just like checking in with people, I think is really great too. Let's say you saw someone got a job promotion, which we see all the time on LinkedIn, right? And you see everyone commenting congratulations. One of my things is I like to like wait a couple weeks and then check in and it's like, I saw you got the promotion. Super excited for you. I'll usually say congratulations when I see it, but I'm like checking in, like, how's the new job going? How are you adjusting? And like, then we can have like a real conversation about like what that looks like or their transition, and things of that nature. And then also as like an early career professional, if someone gives me advice, I like to try their advice and then follow up with like how it went. I think that's a nice little feedback loop too, as someone, as a mentor, like you want to get the feedback, whether your advice was helpful. If maybe you get feedback and you're like, ooh, maybe that doesn't work, or maybe I need to be a little bit more clear or specific when I give that advice or guidance to someone. And so it's just another way of like following up and kind of continuing to foster this relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I love those two bits of like tactical advice as well. Amazing. So I do see a question in the chat. Do you mind providing a little more information? I'm a little uncertain of what exactly you're asking. Are you asking more from the KOL side? Are you asking more from the networking side? So if you could add a little bit more color and description in the chat, that would be great. And now we have some comments coming in the chat. So if there is any question that you would like to ask, this could be about, getting into the pharmaceutical industry, getting into medical affairs, getting into a training sort of position, definitely add them to the chat and we will answer them. Amazing. So, I wanted to continue the conversation we're having now. It's kind of an offshoot of networking, but I would love to ask, what about like, a lot of the things we hear about is like, you need to cultivate like a personal brand. You need to like think about how to put yourself out there in a productive way, especially as you are networking, because it's not just about building your network, because the second you try to connect with someone on LinkedIn, they are likely going to click your profile and be like, who is this person, right? Like even before they maybe even consider, connecting with you. So how, like, I would love to hear like some of your strategies or sort of like tangible approaches to like building your personal brand. I have some thoughts too, but would love to hear yours first.
Yeah. I think for me, it's thinking about what do I want to be known for? So kind of either identifying what that next opportunity I'm looking for is, and then working backwards, like what skills or experiences do I need to have? Do I already have them? How can I showcase them or highlight them in a way that would be attractive to whoever needs to be attracted to my experiences? From that perspective, and making sure that those are like clearly highlighted. So for me, just as an example, when I was going for the oncology training and development role, I want to highlight that I had like oncology experience. So I talked about that. I want to highlight that I had teaching experience, to showcase that I can present in front of people, different topics, different things. And then also just like curiosity and able to learn really quickly. Because what happens a lot of the times in the training and development role is new indications coming. I have to flex. Right now I work cross portfolio, so I'm not on a specific indication or a specific product. So being able to showcase that learning agility was something that I wanted to do too. So those are like the three things that I was looking to highlight. I, reviewed my CV. What do I have to offer that showcases these skills? And those were like the three things that I kept in my LinkedIn profile in my bio as like, hey, here's like the foundations that like I have to set myself apart for this role, looking to build more in this capacity, so that they knew what I had to offer and kind of like what my goals were to make that sort of clear on LinkedIn. So I would say that's kind of how I approach it, but definitely very curious on your strategies as well.
Yes, definitely. So I love the idea of just like making it super simple of like, what do you want to be known for? Because it's almost like getting to that big question of like legacy and all of those things. So like, what do you want to be known for almost like on a broader scale? But I really like starting there because at the end of the day, if someone's like considering connecting with you or you're going after the certain job, they're going to look for evidence one way or the other. So it's either going to be evidence that's going to like support you to, be a good fit for the role, or it's going to be evidence like potentially against that if your LinkedIn or your like online presence is saying something completely different. So I think in the beginning, when it comes to that and trying to figure out what that is, I think people get very overwhelmed because they're like, wait, what if I want to change my mind? Like, what if I want to get, be known for something else later? I say it's fine. You're allowed to change your mind. Like in the beginning, like if you're like, oh, I want an MSL role, amazing. Like structure and reformat things on your LinkedIn, like your headline and your about, and like even under each of your descriptions on LinkedIn, like how can you highlight some of like the 2 to 3 amazing things you did at different roles, whether you're a community pharmacist, a clinical researcher, a nurse practitioner, like how can you highlight a few things under each of those roles that actually pertain to transferable skills that have to do with the MSL role for this example? And let's say you decide to go for the MSL role, and throughout the process of interviewing, you decide, wait, this is not actually a role that I really want. And you decide that you want to shift and do something else. You can always go in and change your LinkedIn. Like whatever you decide to do is not set in stone, and you can always decide to change your mind and put like less pressure on yourself that, oh my gosh, if you're going to like change your whole LinkedIn, you can always go in and change your whole LinkedIn again. The other thing I would say is it's not only what your LinkedIn looks like, it's also what you're posting. And I know like that might be something that also seems super overwhelming, but Libby already gave that great example of like, it could just be an article that you see come up on your feed and you just put your 2 cents on that particular article from your particular perspective. And this does not need to be you don't need to say something earth-shattering that is going to be like grounds for a TED Talk. It's just your opinion on that particular thing. And especially as you're trying to build a presence and build some sort of reputation to get XYZ role, just starting to cultivate some sort of presence online is really important. Another way, and I feel like this is like a hack, but another way that I started to do it when I started, especially as I wanted to be in this very particular niche, is I wanted to get like, because I know that the first thing people do is they'll Google you. So one of the things that will come up on your Google page, on like the first page of Google when someone Googles you, is your LinkedIn. So absolutely you need to focus on that. I would also say, think about like what other things you can be featured in that would show up on the first page of Google. So that could be something pertaining to, let's say if you're a student, that could be something pertaining to like an award that you won at your university, or like some sort of contribution from a university perspective that might come up on your first, page of Google. Also think about like publications. So this could be publications from like a scholarly perspective of like actually, submitting a manuscript and being like a co-author on some sort of, like academic journal situation. Or it could be like writing articles online. Again, this could be LinkedIn articles. Or the hack that I was mentioning is like in the beginning, I created a medium.com profile. If you are unaware of medium.com is literally free, but you can create a profile on Medium where you post articles and you have like, you get a byline because you are writing the articles, you post them. It is 100% free to post. And so I would just start posting articles, and sometimes I would link them on LinkedIn to be like, hey, I recently, was published on medium.com. What's up? But like people don't know oftentimes that medium.com is literally self-publishing. So it looks like kind of a bigger deal than it is. And then for example, in the beginning, when I was trying to like kind of branch out and do more medical writing, I would just link people to examples from medium.com. And I think you could also do that from like linkedin.com and posting like a newsletter or posting articles on LinkedIn, because it just demonstrates like a level of thought leadership that you've published something somewhere, even if it has 0 comments. That's not the point. The point is not engagement, right? The point is that you've like put your voice out there and you have demonstrated that like this is either you are a thought leader in the space because you're providing your particular perspective, or even if it's not like an opinion or like something that is, not objective, you also could be posting objective content of like kind of like a review of something, or like let's say like you want to post something on curcumin or some sort of herbal medicine, then you can actually go through and like do a peer-reviewed sort of article on like why curcumin is an incredible antioxidant for insert reason here. And like, that's another thing that you could start posting about. So there are so many of these different like strategies. I know a lot of people don't just utilize those two. They also think about other social platforms like Instagram and creating different content there, or TikTok and creating different content there. So there's so many different ways to build out your presence. I would just pick something that resonates with you. If you're like, I love to write, then maybe like the medium.com or even Substack is huge now, of like creating like a newsletter sort of a thing. Or like maybe it's video content. Maybe you love creating video content and maybe you just focus on TikTok or something like that. So it's thinking about how you want to get your message across, and also knowing that you can change your mind whenever you want to.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. One, you don't have to be married to anything. Like, we're humans, we change, we shift, we flex. I think also you're like building your portfolio like for all to see, right? And so it takes a level of like vulnerability too, to do that. So recognizing that, but then also if you are consistent with it, and consistent can look different to everyone. So I don't want you to think that means like posting every day and being super, super visible all the time, but it does create a level of visibility. And if people also know what your goals are, what you're looking to do, what you're looking to accomplish, what you're about, then when they have an opportunity that matches you, it comes across their feed, right? They're already thinking of you. Because you've demonstrated that sort of expertise, that thought leadership in that space. So I think it's like really important what you shared there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like brand awareness. It's like you are the brand, and that's like your awareness, and you're paying, and you're not paying, you are not paying for like getting in front of people on places like social media or like medium.com because it's free. And so yeah, I would say don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to have to decide now, and you can always just post and see what happens. Also, if you post and you're like a week later, you're like, wow, I really didn't like that, you can always just delete it too as well.
That is true.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes ish left. So would love to, if you have any questions about anything that we're talking about, would love to answer them in the chat. So please do not hesitate to add those in the chat. I don't see anything else coming in right now, so we can just continue with what we are talking about right now. So is there anything else when it comes to networking that I have not asked you about yet, Libby, that like you're like, I would love to hit on this particular point?
Let's see. I was like, you kind of already talked about like the note taking, but I would also say when you're like networking and maybe being more intentional about that in like trying to expand your network, maybe it's job seeking, definitely keeping notes of the conversations you've had along the way, trying to ask different people different things. If you meet with someone again, try not to have the exact same conversation again. If it's been a little bit and you don't remember what you talked about, I think just like being mindful and intentional of how you utilize the time is super important. Let me see.
On the topic of notes, I really like the idea of like, this is something I came up with, but like, I'm sure there are many other strategies and ways to do it, is every time I meet with someone for the first time, I actually like open up a new note in my notes app on my computer, and I put like call with their name, or I'll just put their name depending on, the day. And then I'll just put my notes, but I'll add like the date and then my notes with that person on that day. So that like when I'm like prepping for the next time I have a call or something, I can look back and I can be like, oh, we met last time in August. This is what we talked about. These were like the action items or whatever that like we both kind of did. And then this is like what we're going to talk about this time. And just kind of like having that level of preparation, I think is really helpful. And it's also helpful, especially when you're doing a lot of these networking chats where like, you might not talk to someone for like literally 3 months or 6 months or like a year. But if you at least have the notes, then you're like, okay, this is what we talked about last time. How is that going? Are you still in the same job? You can look on their LinkedIn and like kind of catch up and have those points. So I think that that's a great idea. I know other people use like Notion or they use Google Sheets, and like a lot of people have like different strategies for what works. I found that that works for me. And also I love that it's backed up to the iCloud just in case that I'm like, okay, worst comes to worst, I don't have like my notebook, because I used to be like a notebook lady where I was like writing everything down. But what I really wanted was like a control F in my notebook, and I couldn't like have that immediate like, wait, where did we talk about that? And how did we talk about that? And maybe my handwriting was weird that day, or I used a pencil and so it smudged, right? So it was just like so much easier to be like, I have my notes app. I can search within the notes app really easily. And if I'm like having a call when I'm traveling or something, I can always go to like iCloud.com and just take out my notes app. So it's also like very decentralized in that way, which I like a lot. So that's just what works for me. I know people who love other ways of taking notes that totally work for them. So I would find a method that works for you so that you're able to stay on top of it, because then it's really easy to continue and pick up the conversation from where you left it the last time.
Absolutely. I'd also add, like, I'm definitely like a note taker, and I love a combination of like handwritten notes. So yeah, I have notebooks all over this office, and all sorts of sticky notes, but I have transitioned to digital because I like to be able to search for my notes. But also there's like apps too. Like there's an app called like Dex. If you want to use that for like filing like all your network and your connections, it like feeds into LinkedIn and stuff too. So that's one. There's another one that someone told me about. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But they said it was better than Dex, but I haven't explored that one yet. So
Oh, interesting. If you remember, definitely post a comment in the LinkedIn Live, because some people might be wondering, and some people might include me. So yeah, I would love to know if there's
yeah,
like any other tool that we should be exploring so that we can really help this process along. Yeah.
because it has like nice little reminders too, so that if you haven't
Mm.
talked to someone in a while, it's like, hey, you haven't spoke to this person in a while. Like, why don't you follow up, check in with them? So it's kind of nice too, from that perspective.
That's awesome.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I will work on finding that.
No, that's great. Amazing. Yeah. What other questions can we answer for everyone in the chat? Yeah, please feel free to add whatever you'd like. Right now, we will hang on for a few more minutes, just in case there's anything that comes through, just so we can make sure that we're rounding out the conversation. But this was great to talk about strategies and networking and just like starting to build your presence online. I know for a lot of clinicians and researchers, this is just like not necessarily something that like brings a lot of excitement to a lot of people. I mean, I can speak personally, like I don't feel like I'm a content creator. That's not something that I like really like to do, but I guess for me, I more understand it from the perspective of like, it's so important to like start building your presence online, because at the end of the day, if you are staying in the industry, if you're staying in academia, if you're, in any sort of path, it is important to think about who you are in the context of your role. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, we might stay at a company for a few years, but it's just not the same as it used to be with like our parents and other generations that like stayed at companies for like 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, maybe 10 still happens, but like 20, 30 years, I feel like doesn't really happen much anymore. And so whether you feel like you are going to be at this company for a long time or not, it's so important to think about who you are and what your value proposition is, like as a personal brand or as a brand, outside of the scope of your company, because you just never know what could happen. And sometimes you leaving the company could be outside of your control. And so always thinking ahead to like how you can best showcase your skills in the time that it makes the best sense.
Yeah, I would also add, I think that's why it's important to build your network now before you really need it. Carla Ann Harris talks about like relationship currency. And so you have to build that over time so that, of course, you can cash in on it a little bit later. So not that we want to be transactional, but if you're building those relationships, then you can ask for the favor, you can ask for the referral, you can ask if they know of any roles, if they can send you anything they might find, because you've established that relationship. So I think it's super important to network now before you need to take advantage of the network that you've built.
Definitely. And I think one of the coolest things is I've experienced it for the first time this year is like especially like pandemic through afterwards, and my roles have just been remote. So I haven't really had the like quote unquote opportunity to actually meet a lot of people that I've been working with in person. And so I finally have had this like full circle moment recently that's been amazing, where it's like, I have been working with like even this like my first ever consulting client, which like I've been working with now for like 2.5 years. They're awesome. We'll continue to work with them for the foreseeable future. And I had never met them in person. And at a recent conference, I finally met the team for the first time. And it's like through networking, you know, I initially met them, got the role. I've been working with them for so long. And it's like, to be able to close that loop and actually meet them in person was just so nice. And so even though like, yes, so many of these connections start out digitally or otherwise, you know, you can end up meeting them in person. That feels so great. And also some of these connections can actually become friends, which has also been a cool unlock for me in the last like maybe 18 months-ish, where like some of the people that I've met, they started off as like hey, would love to get to know you from like a professional standpoint. And it's like, wait, you live where I live. Like, let's just get a coffee. And then it becomes Pilates and it becomes like something else, right? So it's like so fun to see that some of these relationships that start digital actually become real. Amazing. Oh my gosh, we have a question. Are there any in-person networking conferences that you suggest? I'm going to one in December, but I would like to know other ones. So I think this person is asking from like a medical affairs perspective. So I know that there is MAPS, which is an amazing organization that is the Medical Affairs Professional Society, I believe it stands for. So there is that medical affairs conference, and there are tons of people that go there who are actually not yet in medical affairs. So it's amazing to go there and meet people in medical affairs, but also to meet people who have been in the industry for a while, or people who are just newly in the industry, or other people who are also aspiring to be a part of the industry. So that would be probably the top one for medical affairs. There's also conferences like DIA, for example, which is like a massive conference. And I'm fully aware that it's probably one of the biggest pharma conferences in the world, if not the biggest one in the world. And they have their annual conference every single year, but they also have smaller, more regional conferences. Like they have a North America version, or in like a Europe, what is it, EMEA, like that sort of conference. There's an APAC conference. So depending on like where you live, you can like go to those particular conferences. And I think DIA is like such a like wide variety of people all throughout like the kind of pharmaceutical industry landscape, that there might be an interesting opportunity to meet people there. Those are a few that come to mind as they pertain to the pharmaceutical industry. There's also, you mentioned Young Black Pharma. We had someone from the MSL Academy come and go and represent the company last year at that conference, and like they found it incredible. There's also, I went to HBA. Was that last year? I think that was last year. I went to HBA, which is the healthcare women in business, I believe. So there's also that conference, which is national, although they do have international chapters as well, if you're listening and are not in North America. Any other ones that come to mind for you, Libby?
I don't think so. You kind of covered the ones I was thinking of.
Okay.
I'm not as familiar with specific medical
ones.
affairs type ones. So
yes, exactly. So those would be some of the main ones. Oh, the other thing I'd mention is, depending on like if you're interested in a particular therapeutic area. So let's say you're interested in like aesthetics. Aesthetics is like a number of conferences that are throughout the country. That are, well, I mean, generally the biggest ones I know are either like in Vegas, LA, or Miami, but they have certain conferences where you can actually go and interact with like some of the key stakeholders at those conferences. And some of those stakeholders are also, you know, not only on the HCP side, they're also on the like medical affairs side or like the sales side. So you can actually start to create relationships in those particular conferences and those particular settings. So I would also think about like what particular therapeutic areas are exciting to you, that like if you were to get into medical affairs or otherwise, like where would you want to start creating those connections as well? So that's something to consider. Oh, and someone put in the chat MSLS. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one too, particularly like specifically for people who are interested in the MSL role or in the MSL role. Yeah. Cool. Oh my gosh, this was great. So if anyone has any follow-up questions or anything, if they want to learn more about the MSL Academy, they want to learn more about working with Libby directly in a mentorship relationship, definitely reach out to either of us. We both, are on LinkedIn looking at our DMs. So definitely message us if that's something you're interested in. Libby, is there another way that you would prefer people, contact you and reach out to you?
I'd say LinkedIn, or feel free to email me. My email is kind of on all platforms, libby@learnwithlibby.com. So it kind of just rolls off the tongue. But yeah, if there's any questions, always happy to support where I can. And if I don't know the answer, I will find someone who does.
That's the point to make. Yeah, because it's like I might not know the answer either, but I probably know someone who does. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you so much to everyone who joined. Again, if there's anything we can do to help, anything we can do to answer, definitely don't be a stranger. All right. Well, until next time, we definitely do these on a monthly basis. So you can just tune in back. We may or may not be having Libby back soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, just definitely follow along with both of us. And yeah, happy to provide any resources that we can. All righty. Good night.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Thank you.